I'm colorblind, so when I see you, I don't see race. We hear that all the time from our coworkers and from politicians. When an individual talks about being colorblind, they're usually saying, I don't discriminate. Perhaps good intentions, but failed outcome.
At its face value, colorblindness seems like a good thing, right? Really taking Dr. King seriously when he said,
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
But have you ever taken the time to read the rest of his 17-minute speech? The beginning and the middle, where Dr. King is critical about the nation's racial injustices? This famous quote of his has been taken out of context far too many times, but the reality is that this was said towards the end of his speech, where he talks about the goals we dream of achieving one day. But people refuse to address the problems and issues that Dr. King himself spoke about first, before we can actually move on with the solution. In fact, this quote has been misused and distorted to support subliminal racist agendas while promoting colorblind racism.
We want to say bring the truth in the open so we can understand the greatness of this country, but we can't do so by pretending that the ugliness did not exist.
So, Tom, what about that? I mean, are you throwing the baby out with the bathwater, or why not just try to, change the curriculum?
You know what? I was on that march on Washington in summer of 1963. I just graduated from high school, where Martin Luther King gave his famous speech saying we should be judged by the quality of our character and not the color of our skin. And that has been my most fundamental belief my entire life, that we are individuals. We are not exemplars of the race we were born into. And this philosophy that's preached by this program in Tucson and by your other guest, that's a race-obsessed philosophy, and it's a downer philosophy. Teach people that they're oppressed, look, make them angry,
you know what?
Make it so that they
they
don't have hope for their future.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in, too. I'm saying that it's not about, you keep saying downer. Look, it's a downer that people are oppressed. It's a downer that people are depressed. It's a downer that people suffer injustice.
That's not what you should be teaching.
But hold on. But the thing is, if we don't deal with the downers, we can't deal with what's up. We got to deal with, how many stories have we told about Benjamin Franklin? How many stories have we told about Aaron Burr? How many stories have we told about the founding fathers and brothers? And then let's tell the truth about Thomas Jefferson, a great American. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he also one of the authors, but he was also a slaveholder. Let's tell the truth about the downer to Sally Hemings, and then we can tell the full truth about Thomas Jefferson and the full arc of democracy. This kind of ostrich approach where we deny the legitimacy of people, first we oppress them, then we get mad if they say they were oppressed, and then when they say they're part of American history, we deny them. This is a central part of American history that we need to have.
Let's teach American history to all of the kids, and we can show both sides of issues when we teach history to all the kids, but don't divide them by race, and teach the black kids black history, the Chicano kids Chicano history, the Asian kids Asian history. They should all be exposed to all the history. Absolutely. And it's a race-obsessed philosophy that should be kept out of our schools, that kids should be put in courses where they only learn about the history of the race they happen to have been born into. That is the wrong philosophy for the American public schools.
If you have been demoralized and degraded and your history has not been taught, why should we have to have a special class for Chicano studies? Why doesn't the larger curriculum deal with let me tell you, deal with the profound and sophisticated contributions of Chicano people to American society? Once that happens,
we have that in our standards. Once
that happens, then when we integrate the full arc of the contributions of demoralized and degraded peoples into the curriculum, then we won't need that curriculum until that time.
I got to jump in here, Tom. Let me ask you, a lot of your critics say, look, this is about politics. You want to run for Attorney General. You're running for Attorney General. Your term is up as Superintendent. Is that true? You're running for Attorney General?
Yes, I am running for Attorney General. I've served 8 years as Superintendent of Schools, and that's all that's allowed.
So to your critics who say this is about politics, you're basically trying to appeal to potential voters out there.
I've been fighting for this law for 4 years, and this is among my most deeply held beliefs. I mentioned to you being on the March on Washington where Martin Luther King gave his speech. I believe very deeply that people are individuals. They are not exemplars of the race they were born into. And this race-obsessed philosophy that your other guest is expounding, and it's going on in Tucson, is wrong for the American public schools.
It's not race-obsessed. First of all, you repeated that same statement earlier, so it's a great line. But the reality is, Martin Luther King Jr. said, the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of this nation until the Negro and we can add others are granted his full citizenship rights. He talked about the bitter legacy of white supremacy before he began to talk about that dream. And then he said that in America, it's an ideal toward which we should strive. But in the meantime, we should adjust to the reality that we we have some negative realities that we should adjust to and that we should address. And I think that Martin Luther King Jr. cannot be used to justify xenophobic and racist passions that are dressed up as desires to reform the curriculum.
Well, I would say the xenophobia and the racism is on your side. Martin
Not
Luther
at all. I don't
King,
want to keep anybody out. I don't want to keep anybody out. I want to include all people. I don't want Arizona has been deeply, profoundly racist and
kids
xenophobic.
by race. You want to divide kids by race.
No, I want white kids to learn about Chicano people. I want white kids to learn about African American people.
Inspired us all by saying that we should be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin.
The night before he died,
and that
Martin
is
Luther
what
King
we
Jr.
should
said,
be
America,
teaching
all I
in our
ask you is
public
to
schools.
be true to what you said
Treat
on paper.
people as individuals.
One at a time, because both at a time, no one's going to
Against
listen.
the
Michael,
basic
finish
interests of
up.
American people and others, now you must raise them up. Martin Luther King Jr. cannot be taken out of context, and you can't use one speech as if you froze him in 1963 without seeing what he said in 1968, where he was bitterly opposed to the practices of most of what America was doing in the name of freedom and democracy. That's the tradition, I think, that the people in who support Chicano studies in Arizona are carrying forward.
Tom, I want you to...
There's this ridiculous notion in the U.S. that race does not or should not matter in a society where its people and its laws are nowhere near being colorblind. A nation that allows for stop and frisk policies to continue, where 84% of victims are innocent Black and Latino males, whose only crime has been their appearance. And our judicial systems that disproportionately convict people of color at much higher rates for the exact same crime a white person commits. A nation that fed on the hate from Islamophobia post 9/11, but rather than fixing the damage, continues to allow for the harassment of those of Middle Eastern descent. A nation where hate crimes are frequently committed simply because someone does not look or dress like you. Where communities are forced to take to the streets what our justice system fails to accomplish in the courts. A nation that allows for racial profiling to be signed into law, while others are being dehumanized to be hunted down and kept like animals. And a nation whose definition of who gets to be American or not still fails and revolves around the ethnocentric belief that only white people can be American. It is a national embarrassment to claim that we have moved on past race.
And that's part of what it means to be American, to me, is to have all these things that you can do if you want to, that you don't have to do if you don't want to do. And there's a way in which American and white and human become synonyms. That why can't we just treat each other as human beings? To me, when I hear it from a white person, it means, why can't we all just pretend to be white people? I'll pretend you're a white person, and then you can pretend to be white. Why don't you eat what I eat? Why don't you drink what I drink? Why don't you think like I think? Why don't you feel like I feel? God damn it, I'm so sick and goddamn tired of hearing about that. I'm sick of that. That's what it means to be human being to me. That's what it means to be white. That's what it means to be American. Why don't you come the hell over here? That's what I hear every goddamn day. And you know that I can't come over there. You know that this skin and that this hair and that this way that I talk and that I think and I feel will never, ever get included because I'm unpalatable to this goddamn nation. I'm unpalatable. You cannot swallow me. You cannot taste me. You cannot feel me because you don't want to. You think that you can survive without me, but you can't, man. You think that, hey, it'll all be fine when we just treat each other like human beings. And what that says to me is, don't be yourself. Be like me. Keep me comfortable. Connect where I'm ready to connect. Come out to my place. Or maybe I'll come down and get some artifacts from your place. That is bullshit.
I hear nothing's more American than immigrating in. Working hard is more important than the color of your skin. But if that's true, then why is every face that looks like me associated with takeout, kung fu, and exotic villainy? I mean, we wear the same clothes and we do the same things. We talk the same way, but it was never a real dream for me to be friends with Rachel, Joey, and Ross. Or Jason Chu to be the answer to the question, who's the boss? Even on Cheers, the place where everybody is supposed to know my name, I never heard of Chu, Win, Lok, Kim, or Chang. So I concluded that an Asian face is only right If we're talking about rice or a high-tech device, I mean, I went to see The Dark Knight Rise, and I cheered every time that I saw an Asian face. Twice. This is why we can't win the systems that we're in. If we try to build separate communities, we're viewed as aliens. But if we try to play along, we have no hope of blending in, because they'll never let John Wayne be played by John Chen. But The Last Airbender was Noah Ringer, and Goku was Justin Chatwin, and the whole cast of Akira was going to be played by white men. But I have never seen a role with the European name be filled by an Asian with the excuse, we cast for talent, not for race. So the La Jolla Playhouse can say anything they want. In the end, I don't see action, so I conclude it's just a front for the same racism that has always been there. Because colorblind is just another way to say, we don't care.
I don't see color. Racism doesn't exist anymore. If we stop talking about racism, it will go away.
When race-related problems arise, colorblindness tends to individualize conflicts rather than examining the larger picture as a whole. Research has shown that hearing these colorblind messages predict negative outcomes among whites, such as greater racial bias and negative interactions, which likewise creates a greater strain on ethnic minorities. As we realize from issues that we still face today, though it's been 50 years since our civil rights movement, our progress is not exactly where we hoped it would be. This colorblind approach is ineffective and delays real change. What we need to become is multicultural, an ideology that acknowledges, highlights, and celebrates ethno-racial differences. It is not afraid to see how others have suffered as a result of racial conflict. We need to recognize and value differences. We need to teach and learn about these differences as well. Moving from colorblindness to multiculturalism is a process of change. Change is never an easy battle, but it's a battle we can no longer prolong.
You don't see color? I constantly hear people saying this. When they see me, they tell me they can't see my race, but they don't say that to my white peers. What you don't understand is I'm proud of who I am. I am Mexican, and that is not a shameful word. You never tell me you can't see that I'm a woman, and you don't ignore my religion. So why is this the only part of me that you refuse to see? I am not just your Mexican friend. I am Stephanie, and I want you to see all of me.
If you don't see race, how can you see racism? It shaped the history of the U.S. Racism today still shapes the experiences of people of color, and by extension, even me, a white man. I've never been asked if I got my job or my place at school because of affirmative action. I never have to worry about being denied an apartment because of the color of my skin. I can walk down the street without worrying about being stopped because I look dangerous. What does that even mean? The second I stop asking questions like that and acknowledging the privileges that I have is the second I stop respecting my fellow human beings.
If you don't see color, how do you see yourself? You have a race too, you just don't have to think about it. Yeah, we're taught that race is socially constructed, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. And sure, race really has no biological basis, but the fact that we categorize people based on skin color remains. And being placed in those racial categories affects people's lives, where they get a job, where they live, even access to health care and education. Personally, I'm biracial, half Mexican and half white. But because of my light skin, I'm given a misplaced white privilege. And I don't have to worry about people judging me based on my skin color. But my family members, who all have darker skin than me, do have to worry about that judgment. And I can't help but to see that. You may say you are colorblind, but we don't live in a colorblind society. If you don't see color, you don't see me.
I see no changes, all I see is racist faces. Misplaced hate makes disgrace to races. We I wonder what it takes to make this one better place. Let's erase the wasted. Take the evil out the people, they'll be acting right. It's both black and white and smoke.